Jeff Bezos wakes up at 5:30 a.m. Warren Buffett spends 80% of his day reading. And Elon Musk plans his day in 5-minute blocks. The habits that separate billionaires from everyone else aren't what most people think. They're surprisingly simple yet consistently overlooked. I spent 3 years studying the daily routines of the world's wealthiest individuals, and what I discovered changed everything about how I approach my own life. The 5 habits I'm about to share aren't just correlated with success. They're the fundamental building blocks that transformed ordinary people into extraordinary achievers. And the most shocking part? You could start implementing all 5 tomorrow morning. What if I told you the most powerful moment in your journey to success happens before 99% of people even open their eyes? The billionaire secret hiding in plain sight isn't complex. It's the deliberate conquest of dawn. Think about how your typical morning unfolds. The jarring alarm followed by the immediate reach for your phone. The flood of notifications dictating your first thoughts. The rushed shower, the hurried breakfast, if you eat at all, and the frantic dash out the door. This reactive start doesn't just create a morning of chaos. It establishes the neurological foundation for your entire day. Your brain is literally being programmed for reactivity rather than strategic thought. This is where you stand on one side of a vast chasm, while on the opposite edge stand the world's most successful individuals with their structured dawn rituals. The first major obstacle in your transformation isn't about skills or connections. It's about your relationship with the earliest hours of the day and your resistance to sacrificing immediate comfort for long-term transformation. Raphael Badziag, after interviewing over 20 self-made billionaires for his research, discovered a striking pattern. An average wake-up time of 5:30 a.m. Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Richard Branson, none rise later than 6 a.m. Without exception, even after decades of success when they could easily afford to sleep in. This isn't coincidence, it's strategy. This early rising isn't simply about squeezing more productivity into each day. It's about claiming psychological territory in those quiet hours when the world hasn't yet begun making demands on your attention. It's about operating in a mental environment where your willpower reserves are at their peak, untouched by the 1,000 tiny decisions that will gradually deplete them as the day progresses. The morning ritual formula these billionaires follow has remarkable consistency. They begin with approximately 20 minutes of contemplative practice, whether meditation like Ray Dalio or journaling like Ariana Huffington. This is followed by 30 to 60 minutes of physical movement. Richard Branson credits his morning exercise with doubling his productive capacity. The final component is strategic planning for the day ahead, all completed before most professionals have had their first coffee. Your current morning routine is creating neural pathways that prime your brain for either reactivity or strategic thinking throughout the day. The difference between checking emails first thing versus spending 20 minutes in contemplative thought isn't just about those 20 minutes. It rewires how your brain approaches every subsequent challenge. Billionaires understand this is not a neutral choice, but a fundamental operating system decision. Here's where most transformation attempts fail: trying to radically overhaul your morning in one fell swoop. The counterintuitive approach that actually works begins with smaller steps than you'd think necessary. Start by waking just 5 minutes earlier each day while focusing intensely on the quality of those morning moments rather than their duration. This gradual shift prevents the identity homeostasis that typically rejects dramatic lifestyle change. Oprah Winfrey describes her morning ritual as setting the intention for the day. This seemingly simple practice actually represents a profound psychological distinction. While most people allow external circumstances to establish their daily mental state, billionaires proactively create their mental environment from the inside out, beginning in those first uncontested morning hours. The profound payoff isn't merely about productivity. Waking at 5:30 a.m. creates uncontested mental space for the kind of strategic thinking that compounds over time. These early hours allow billionaires to operate from an entirely different mental framework than Their competition? One where problems are approached with full cognitive resources rather than depleted ones. As Tim Cook, who rises at 3:45 a.m., explains, the things that can dilute your focus rise exponentially in the day. Morning is about me. This framing transforms early rising from a productivity hack into a fundamental identity practice, one that protects your most valuable asset, your focused attention. As you master this first challenge in your hero's journey, you'll notice ripple effects throughout your day. Improved decision making, enhanced creativity, and greater resilience to stress. But conquering the morning is merely preparation for your second major trial, rewiring your mind through strategic learning habits that separate billionaire thinking from even high-achieving professionals. The morning hours you've reclaimed represent potential energy, but it's what you pour into those sacred moments that determines whether you merely become productive or truly transformative. Most ambitious professionals mistake information consumption for knowledge acquisition, while billionaires approach reading with the same strategic intensity they bring to capital allocation. This isn't about how many pages you turn. It's about systematically converting information into patterns that reveal opportunities invisible to others. In a world engineered to fragment your attention, the average professional has become a passive consumer, mindlessly scrolling through feeds designed by algorithms to hijack your neural pathways. Each notification, each headline, each video delivers a small dopamine hit while preventing the deep connections that create true insight. You're consuming more content than any generation in history, yet somehow understanding less of what truly matters. This gap between information consumption and knowledge application represents your second major trial. The question isn't whether you're reading, it's whether you're building an intellectual infrastructure that will compound over decades, like financial investments. Warren Buffett exposes this stark reality through his 80% rule, dedicating the vast majority of his waking hours not to meetings or management, but to reading materials specifically chosen to strengthen his mental models across multiple domains. But what separates billionaire reading habits from even high-achieving professionals isn't volume, it's their systematic approach to knowledge as a competitive advantage. Consider Bill Gates, who twice yearly retreats from the world entirely during his legendary Think Weeks. During these 7-day isolation periods, Gates processes over 100 articles and books without distraction, creating the cognitive space that has repeatedly saved Microsoft from obsolescence. These aren't casual reading sessions, but strategic immersions that have directly informed pivotal business decisions worth billions. The contrast with your current approach couldn't be more striking. Where most professionals read randomly, following whatever appears in their feed, billionaires follow a deliberate protocol. They begin with foundational texts across multiple disciplines, creating a base of principles that transcend individual contexts. They systematically track industry innovations while simultaneously studying both success and failure through biographical accounts. Perhaps most crucially, they deliberately seek out materials that challenge their existing beliefs, preventing the echo chamber effect that kills innovation. Mark Cuban demonstrates this approach through his daily 3-hour learning commitment. What makes Cuban's habit remarkable isn't just the time investment, but his cross-disciplinary approach. By connecting ideas across seemingly unrelated industries, he creates pattern recognition systems that allow him to see opportunities before specialists even recognize them. While others develop depth in single areas, Cuban develops the mental frameworks to identify unseen connections across multiple domains. Your relationship with information likely resembles consumption rather than construction. You read an article, absorb it momentarily, and move on, leaving nothing permanent behind. Billionaires instead approach each text as raw material for building intellectual infrastructure. They extract principles, not just facts. They connect new information to existing knowledge. They deliberately process what they've learned through reflection, discussion, or application. These aren't passive activities, but active processes of transformation. This strategic approach to knowledge reveals a profound truth. Information without application creates intellectual obesity, not intellectual strength. Just as consuming food without exercise leads to unhealthy physical accumulation, consuming information without processing and applying it creates mental bloat rather than usable wisdom. Billionaires read, not to know more facts, but to develop superior judgment. The ability to see patterns emerging before others can recognize them. The reading habit separating extraordinary achievers from the merely ambitious isn't simply about quantity. It's their approach to knowledge as intellectual capital that compounds over time. They don't read to appear smart in conversations. They read to build intricate mental models that function as pattern recognition systems. These systems allow them to identify opportunities, anticipate threats, and make connections that remain invisible to even brilliant specialists who lack their integrated knowledge framework. What separates billionaires from dreamers isn't some magical formula or secret knowledge. It's their uncompromising commitment to transformative habits. These 5 daily practices aren't temporary behaviors they adopt. They're the very essence of their identity. When you embrace these habits as who you are rather than just what you do, you experience the profound shift that defines the hero's journey. Your transformation isn't measured by a final destination, but by becoming someone who can never return to former limitations. The journey begins with a single decision. Will you wake up tomorrow at 5:30 a.m. and begin building your new self? The extraordinary life awaits those willing to implement simple systems with religious consistency.